Hey guys, how's it going? Burton coming back at you with another custom setup video. And this time, might as well present to you arguably one of my best setups ever made. And that's here at Atlanta, as I just recently competed in the Nascar Heat Ultimate Summer Showdown. So let's take a look at this setup if we shall. You look at the shocks. 7 to 9s, up and down from top to bottom. A big reason why this has to do with is because of the fact that we have a 1775 sway bar. Now, the big thing about Atlanta is it's a very abrasive track. Your goal is to maximize tire wear while still pretty much finding that car stuck to the ground and maximizing speed. So thus, if your shocks were lower, a lot lower, let's say, 6.7 or 5.5s, not only will you may not make the corners because of the bumps, but your car is also going to drag speed. The same thing can be said if you ultimately make your bumps and rebounds a lot higher. So that's going to be one thing to note as well. You're really looking to minimize scrubbing speed while maximizing top speed. Now, of course, in terms of our spring setup, pretty standard. Again, if you watched my Daytona video, I'll say that almost every track we go to, with the exception of Bristol and a few others, you are going to want 1200, 600 springs. Tire settings, again, big factor here, and this is a little bit weird compared to most setup videos in regards to the right side tires. However, 2175 on the left front, sometimes you're around 2150s, but you see a 60 to 59 split on the right rear. Now, I know what you're about to say, well, typically a 1% tire split, or I should say rather a 1 PSI tire split, typically means the car is going to be loose. But you see, this is how we're going to answer back. And if you look at the cambers, 4.2 left front, that's going to allow you to rotate again. Atlanta is a nearly wide open track. So this is going to help you stick the bottom, run that Kevin Harvick line, needless to say. And then this is where the tightness comes in and plays a big factor in saving these right side tires to go to the distance. And that is ultimately the right front camber. Now, if you go down on your right front camber, typically, you're going to be a lot more looser. If you go up, however, it tends to give you more grip and stability, specifically on the exits of the corners. That was the goal here with the 3.7, so there's not going to be much fishtailing with this setup. You also look maxed out track bars, 15 apiece. That's a big factor. The brake bias 17. You also look down back in the weight settings before I go back to the miscellaneous settings. 55 wedge. Again, with these track bars, with these cambers and the tire pressures, again, you're trying to maximize tire wear while still keeping it good and tight. The 55 wedge plays that role. The front weight as well, 52, keeps the nose nice and sound. And of course, front ride heights, that's all standard, as well as the left weight. But going back to the miscellaneous settings, brake bias 70%. Now, another thing to note before we get to one of the main points about this setup is that when you're exiting, or I should say rather coming into pit road, trying to slow down, you want to be very, very careful. Atlanta in particular is one of the very strong tire abrasive tracks in terms of banking to flatness, and it only does it really at this track in particular on NASCAR Heat. So if I were you, and just to take note, jot it down, if you have 5% or less on your left front tire, just take note, you're probably going to cut down a tire when you're coming down the pits. Now, the right rear, not as much. You drop about 2 to 3%, and if I believe the right front was about 3%. But typically on this setup, right rear is going to be the second lowest tire. It's going to be left front. That's right around with the right rear, if not even. That's your ultimate goal. However, your goal is to avoid cutting down left front tire. And honestly, if you were to cut one down, you'd probably want it to be the right front, although it's going to be a little bit hard to do at this track. Typically, you'll probably end up cutting down a right rear if you don't cut down the left front. Now, let's look at the tape. Obviously, 55 tape. We'll talk more about the gears in a moment. But this is arguably the biggest part of this setup, and that's the wheel lock and the steering offset. Now, if you're a controller driver, this setup may be very much optimal for you, because if you're on a wheel, with this steering offset I'm running, it's going to feel a little bit tight. You're going to have to get used to it in terms of getting into the corners. And no, it's not necessarily a setup. This offset really makes it hard to turn. You're going to have to put a little bit of input, not much as a Maxwell Castro input where you're turning 180 degrees. The goal is to get it about, 45-degree angle, going into the right direction. However, this offset really focuses and emphasizes straight line speeds. So if you're a guy that runs, low draft leagues or normal draft, this is going to be a really big benefit for you, because straight line speed is going to allow cars to not necessarily tuck up and suck up off the back of your bumper as easily. So this offset's going to really help you. It's also going to really help you conserve those right side tires. Now, again, I mentioned controllers. This may be your favorite because, again, 150 offset's harder to turn. So with that being said, with it being much harder to turn, thing you also have to remember is the fact that controllers are a lot more sensitive than wheel. So if you're tapping and the rear end starts to slide, it's not necessarily going to do that. It's going to feel a lot more stiffer. Thus, you'll end up more than likely like in a transition. And if we look at the gears as well, this gear set, I promise you folks, is not going to fail you. I'm running 9 solo with it, as you'll see in this next video. But ideally, this is the overall gear package you are going to want to run. Here's a look at the 2 laps around the track. And that's 2 laps around Atlanta. Overall, running about high 9s to mid 9s solo. And ultimately, in the draft, you'll be running low to mid 8s guaranteed. And again, that's without low fuel. That's all full fuel. All our setups here will be 2X and 3X ready for custom setup league racing. By the way, folks, if you want to join the hottest racing league on Xbox and one of the biggest, currently at about 100 drivers, the Red Hot Racing League is looking for drivers for season 1.5 on NASCAR Heat 5. We'll have about an 8-race season, including a draft upcoming in the next few weeks, ultimately to set up the countdown to ignition, in which we'll have season 2, of course, on the brand new game. But if you have interest, feel free to leave a comment down below and we'll get you taken care of. And if you have any questions on today's setups, I'll be more than glad to help. Again, Daytona's video had a really strong reception, and overall, I'm really glad to be back and have the time now to start making some custom setup videos to help out the NASCAR Heat community. But with that being said, I've been Burton saying so long as you've been watching another WB video. We'll see you next time for more custom setup tips, action, and ultimately fast speed that'll help you get to where you need.